But as I hung up the phone, I felt my heart racing. It was so sad. Damn, they got JB too. This is where I get real frustrated with Jada. JB is a thug, right? So what are you like, damn, the feds got JB? Yeah, they did get JB because he's selling drugs on the streets and killing people, right? So this is why I get real annoyed, because it's like, all right, she wants to have this anger and this angst towards the judicial system. It's almost like she wants the criminals to win. Hey, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. We are doing another chapter of Worthy, and we're on chapter 7 today. Today's chapter is called Promise of a Perfect World. It's all about how she has come into Hollywood and the way she kind of got into the game, how she ascended the ladder, how she found permanent work and became an actual working actress. She does a good job. I think it was a very pivotal time for Black talent in Hollywood in the 90s. There was a lot that was being opened up, and it was a time when, as she says, Black talent was very popular, Blackness was not, and she'll explain what she means by that. Sort of an interesting take on it. You know, I will say that I think Jada is, by and large, fairly reasonable about this kind of stuff. Like, I know that like her aunt and her mom were really shaped by the Black Panther movement and have a lot of feelings and anger and angst about racial relations and the inherent unfairness that they attribute to every interaction that a Black person will have with a white person. Jada, though she was raised with that, and you know, Tupac was her friend and gave her a lot of his opinions that were similarly colored, she doesn't really seem to have taken that to heart to a marked degree. I think the things that she says are very interesting because I feel like they're fairly fair. She certainly felt that she was treated differently in Hollywood, but I think a lot of the assessments that she makes are not untrue. Now, clearly I wasn't Black and trying to work in the 90s, so I don't know exactly what the landscape was like, but I can see what she's talking about. I see her point, and so this chapter was really interesting. For a variety of reasons. One is that she talks about what it was really like trying to claw her way up into becoming a working actress. And, you know, it's interesting. I always enjoy reading about a different world, a world that I would never, oh, look at that, a different world. No, but I mean, really, like a different world that I have no idea about. I don't know what the world is about, you know, in Hollywood. I don't know what it's like what are the challenges of being a young actress. So this chapter was interesting to me because I feel like it really dealt with a reality versus a description of a questionable reality. Like, I didn't totally believe that she was, you know, ruling the B-more streets. But her description of Hollywood seems so much more true, and it just rings more true than a lot of the stuff she was talking about from her days in Baltimore. Look, I'm not even going to take away from her that she was, you know, slumming sometimes in the streets. I'm not saying that she didn't have a hard life and that she wasn't up against it on numerous occasions. But this idea that she was truly slinging dope in the streets, that she was rubbing elbows with the best of them, that she was making her mark and all this, and that she was truly ascending the ladder. Like the idea that she was, you know, big friends with Chet, this huge kingpin, and that he wasn't going to hold her account for the drugs and the money that she had lost. The fact that she wasn't taking drugs but dealing in the street, but everybody else was, and she was constantly partying, but not doing drugs, of course. Like, I don't even believe that. And, you know, previous times in different chapters, she did talk about how she could party much harder than her boyfriend, John. Remember John? White boyfriend, John? And, you know, she talks about how, you know, he was doing drugs with her and how she was taking different substances. So in the last chapter, when she talked about how her mom gave her a urine test to make sure she wasn't actually taking these drugs, and then she says that the test came back clean, I don't believe she took a test, because I don't believe her urine would have come back clean. Now, in this particular chapter, we're not going to deal with her partying. That's next chapter. I accidentally read ahead by mistake and was shocked by what I was reading. So stay tuned for the next chapter, because we're really going to get into her heavy drinking and drug use. And it's just not possible that suddenly now she decides to take drugs, but when she was dealing drugs, it never crossed her mind to do so. Anyway, this chapter is predominantly about her making headway in Hollywood, and it's pretty interesting. I enjoyed it. All right, as always, I always forget to tell you guys this, but if you wouldn't mind, if you would hit that like button, subscribe, you guys. If you're watching and not subscribed, how are you going to know about when the next chapter drops? And, you know, hit that bell, notifications, you know how it goes. I don't say it because it's annoying. You know what to do. YouTube's not new. But somebody was telling me the other day, if you don't say it, they won't do it. And I was like, I don't think they're idiots. I think they know how YouTube works. But anyway, if you don't mind, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Appreciate y'all. Come back again. All right, chapter 7 is Promise of a Perfect World. What's up, Square? Pac begins, as always, and then bursts into that contagious giggle of his. The levity and big energy in his voice make me smile. Boy, what do you want? I've just gotten home from rehearsal at the studio. I'm tired, I have Rottweilers to feed, and I'm not in the mood for his nonsense. As usual, though, Pac couldn't care less about whether I'm tired. He's on a mission. Look, there's this movie I want us to do together. It's called Menace to Society. I thought back to the few years earlier when I'd arrived in LA in the early summer of 1990. All I wanted to do was win, 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 and I believed if I played the game right, it would deliver me the life of prosperity, peace, and happiness I'd always wanted. That was the dream. Trying to make it as a queen pin hadn't offered me that dream, though the game had taught me a strong hustle. A hustle I brought to LA. That's going to be a big theme in this chapter of what she brought from Baltimore, this hustle that she brought, this idea of herself that she brought. You know, she was very confident. She believed she was something. And if you didn't believe that, that was your problem. Sounds like a personal problem to me. You know, I'm something and you should be wanting to take, you know, a little of this for yourself if you were so lucky, you know. So she goes into every audition just like completely and totally fully driven by ego. She totally knows she's something, and she's not here to let you tell her that she isn't. And it serves her to a certain point. She's very reflective about it, which is one of the reasons I enjoy this chapter. She's very honest about what she was doing well and what she really, really, really was not, and how she was being a bit off-putting in some circumstances. But she says that, you know, the truth is when you look at somebody who seems like they have had sudden success in Hollywood, the reality is they were struggling for a long time. So Jada says, everybody who grabs the spotlight probably looks like an overnight success because you ain't know them before they got on the scene. But behind each one of those stories is someone who's willing to suffer setbacks and put in the hard work, hoping for a little sprinkle of luck. She says that the best talisman that she had was her mother's belief in her. And she said that without it, she just doesn't think she could have pursued the acting career with such confidence. But just like everyone else, she had to deal with the Hollywood catch-22. She says, this is the problem. And this is what this is what you always hear. She said, if I don't have any recent or current credits, you're stuck trying to get credits, which you can't get if you don't have any credits. Yeah, that seems like just a nightmare. You'd always be being plowed under because there's no way for you to get ahead. Nightmare. But she said, how do you overcome that? Well, you have your training, your talent, your skills, and your commitment to hard work, but then you also need to have connections. You know, networking is how you're going to make this happen, Captain. The thing is that a connection can't give you a career, she says, but it can help you get your foot through the door. And then, of course, timing is crucial. She said, there's one other asset that might seem to be a curse, but can turn out to be the ace up your sleeve. For me, that was my education from the University of the Bmore Streets. I had cultivated fearlessness and a no-nonsense attitude. However, it was sometimes a double-edged sword because some would say that I would come off as abrasive, distant, and aloof. I didn't seem approachable, which until now had worked as a beautiful defense mechanism and kept me safe. But here in Hollywood, it seemed as if I had a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't aware of this edge because that's just how we rolled back in the East Coast. See, I think that's so interesting, you know? I could totally see her feeling like her whole, you know, street persona was just like toughness and like confidence. But it would have been perceived, particularly I think on the West Coast, as having an attitude, you know, like, what's your problem? And then this too, you guys, I just love stuff I don't know. She said, I also got a lot of pushback for being rough around the edges, whether it was my Baltimore accent or the fact that I wasn't your clean-cut girl next door in my style. And oh yeah, I was too hairy. On the East Coast, hair was considered sexy. Hairy legs, arms, upper lip, even bushy eyebrows were celebrated where I was from. I once had a very famous black actor tell me at a pool party when he saw me in shorts, Jada, promise me that you'll never shave your legs. And I remember thinking, gladly. Really? I had no idea. I had no idea that in her community, upper lip hair and, hairy legs and hairy arms, I didn't know that. Don't you just love stuff you don't know? But she said that this so-called chip on her shoulder was her refusal to lose herself in this very white Hollywood standard of poise, dress, and attitude that was slowly but surely being pressed upon me. Black talent was in vogue. Blackness off screen was not. So I think this is a very interesting conversation. Having never been in this situation, I'm interested to hear what her experience of this was. Because I don't think that she's completely off the mark here. Obviously, I wouldn't know. This was not my personal experience. But I can, even from this vantage point, I could see what she's talking about in the sense that there is a bit of whitewashing that goes on. And not just like you have to be white, but just that you have to be a different cultured. Like, I don't think that it's the color of your skin that they are rejecting, but like this, what she would say, this whole chip on her shoulder, rough around the edges persona is not one necessarily that they want to deal with. And so, I think it's interesting that she equates their desire for her to change her demeanor is them trying to whitewash her. I don't know if that's the case, but let's keep reading. She says, often I heard the question, what are you mixed with? Excuse me? Is your mother white? No, she happens to be full-blooded West Indian, I would answer proudly. Oh, that's it. It's the Indian in you. This casting director was trying to imply that to look as I did, I couldn't be a full African-American heritage. And he assumed that the Indian in my mother's heritage meant Native American. I got to the point where I saw such comments as ignorant and ridiculous, but I could not believe how frequently I heard them. What got me was the constant look of disbelief whenever I replied that both my parents were simply black. Ringing in my ears all the time was my Aunt Karen's words about never speaking on the mixed blood anywhere in my bloodline. She'd emphasize that people would always try to use that influence in your background as an excuse for why you had an appealing quality at all, even if the one relative from another race was from 3 generations ago. They'll never want to give your blackness credit, Jada. Don't let them do that. I think what's really interesting is the thing is she doesn't look fully black. So why is she offended that people don't realize that she is? I mean, look at Jada. Jada looks like a mixed, someone with mixed heritage. She just does. And I don't understand why this is like a big point of offense to her, unless she attributed the fact that she sees them trying to suss out where the whiteness is so that they can decide why they are drawn to her. Like if she was 100% black, she would just, there's the dung heap, go hang out over there. We don't want you at all. I don't know if that is what they were asking. I mean, we live in a time in which it's considered offensive to want to know about somebody's heritage. And again, it's not like she was just having a pleasant conversation where someone was like, where are your people from? That's, I guess, one kind of question. If you feel like your whole exterior is being judged, and it is in an audition, then I can completely see her being offended by a question because it looks like the casting director is trying to find out why he would want you. So I understand it's a completely different conversation that she's having, but I don't know necessarily if it was like a racist thing that they were asking. But it is an interesting question that they would ask. Maybe it is racist to need to know in that scenario what her background is, because the reality is, do you like what you see in front of you? Is she what you're looking for? Do you want to cast her? You really don't need to know who's who and what's what in her background. So I don't know. It's a completely weird conversation, but truly standing in front of a casting director trying to get them to pick you based on your looks is a weird situation that isn't socially normal anyway. So anyway, she says, whenever the question arose at a time when I was knocking on doors hoping that they would open for me, I thought of Aunt Karen. Once I began to enter these audition rooms, I would come across a lot of fake wolves posing as producers, casting directors, and such. The Hollywood flex was amusing, but they'd be quite a few times when I let jokers know I ain't the one. Compared to the real wolves of B-more, these show business jokers was more like little puppies. Sometimes I got nervous because I always wanted to do well, but this wasn't a life or death for me like it was for some. I knew all too well what life and death looked like. I could keep everything in perspective and just ride. The hustle became fun and exciting. My real edge, I knew it was all a game. See, but here's the problem. I see what she's saying. But also, if everything in life is a game, where does sober living come in? Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't mean sober living as in not taking drugs or drinking. I mean You can't always be playing a game. When are you being real? It was all a game on the Be More streets. It was all a game at school. Now it's all a game at, trying to get a job here. When are you not playing a game? When do you just turn off and you're like, and here I am. Here's Jada. It's like, what? Why does everything have to be this hustle? It's always the hustle. It's always the game. It's always a big joke, but where do you live? Where's peace, I guess, is what I want to know. Then she takes a couple of pages to talk to us about the gangsta situation over in LA. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't 100% follow it because she uses a lot of words and terms and expressions that aren't readily available, I think, to every audience. So it certainly wasn't for me. I don't know what she's talking about. So suffice it to say, she was a little bit mixed up about the situation with gangs and colors and which parts you could and could not go out of in LA. She said that like one time she was at a stoplight and this, hoopty rolls up and they're flashing signs and she thinks they're trying to say something, but her friend who's in the car with her, who's from LA, is like, they're flashing signs. And so like they got to gun it, I don't think that it would be a story about LA in the 90s if she didn't talk about the gang situation. So, she's got to pay homage to that. But then she wants to tell us about what was happening after the Rodney King trial, because she happened to be in Rodeo Drive that day. And she would like you to know that she participated in the looting and the burning. She says that not too far from my house on Comey Avenue, I was out and about when the acquittal in the Rodney King trial was announced. I will never forget how Black people poured into the streets, rioting and looting. The community was furious, fed up, tired of the system constantly reiterating that a Black man beaten senseless by cops had no recourse under the law. My girlfriend Keisha was visiting me from Baltimore that day, and we took our frustration to the street. Within the chaos of the riot was a unified voice. F this! You will hear us today! Youth plus anger plus passion plus frustration can rightfully equal impetuous acts. Expressions of anger, frustration, and the need to be heard, many got caught up in the tide that would render unintended consequences as we grabbed stuff out of local stores. At that point in my life, I definitely believed justice meant an eye for an eye. Maturity would teach me that's not always the case. That night of looting and burning down business destroyed resources that we needed in our community, and we felt it. She says, we knew that what had happened to one of us happened to all of us. The saving grace was in the midst of this chaos. There was a lot of love to be found in many of our homes, churches, and community centers as reminders of our worth. In the end, the tragedy was that not much changed to address the pain of that moment or to prevent the moment from happening again, or worse. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I understand what was going on in the streets after the Rodney King trial. What I am going to tell you is that doesn't make sense to destroy what you have because you're angry at the establishment. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I just think, I understand that if you perceive that injustice has been done, and I would say that in that situation, justice was not met, it just makes empirically no sense to then go out, destroy what you have to say, I don't like what the fat cats have done. Do you think that the fat cats aren't going to rebuild your neighborhood if you destroy it? Now you've got a mess, and they, according to you, aren't going to help you. So now what are you going to do? They've already hurt you, and then you go and hurt yourself? Hindsight is 20/20. It's easy for me to sit back and say, well, that was dumb. I mean, even Jada saying that was pretty foolish that we did that. But, she says to her, the way they perceived it was that because it happened to one of them, it was going to happen to all of them, or it had happened to all of them. That's what she says. It had happened to all of them. Well, that's elevated language. It hadn't happened to all of them. And, it's very, it's cathartic for immature emotions to assume the pain that is witnessed when somebody else gets hurt, so that then you can sort of rage out and express, wild emotion, and you can live in no fear of consequences because you can always say, yeah, but this happened to my community, and so it's the same as it happening to me. Unfortunately, it's not the same because you weren't beaten to death in the streets. So you can't now say, I get to be angry because. If my neighbor next door decides to beat his wife, I don't then get to be upset and be like, I'm a wife too, and that could have happened to me. Well, it's not happening to me, so I don't get to rage out and be indignant about pain that was felt by my neighbor, right? Anyway, again, I feel like Jada's fairly fair in her assessment of that situation. I mean, I think she does still I don't know if she would still choose to react in that way, but I think she takes a fair assessment of it. She says the period from late 1990s to the late 90s was truly prime time for young hopefuls like me. That was when so many doors began to open for Black actors. Hollywood was finally gaining the confidence to invest in untapped Black potential, allowing for what I often call the golden years of Black Hollywood. You know, as a side note, you almost wonder, it's like the stuff with Rodney King was so horrific. But I wonder if she didn't benefit from the fact that there was so much racial unrest, because I almost feel like that's why there was such a bolstering in Black entertainment. You know, it's almost like people wanted to express and explain, like, we don't have any animosity. You know, it's almost like if the white directors and white Hollywood is trying to make sure that America at large understands, hey, this is a LA police problem. This is not a entertainment's problem. This is not the entertainment industry's problem. This is not even an American problem. Like, we want to see Black stories. We want to see Black actors. We want to uplift and uphold this talent. You know, so whatever's going on with the LA police department and their inability to control their people, that's not the way we as Americans feel. Jada goes and loots and tears down her community in response to the Rodney King thing. But I think that ironically, I think it's the Rodney King thing that actually helped her to find such position in LA. That's purely my opinion, but I wonder if there's some truth to that. She says that one thing that was lacking, though, in the scene was the fact that there was a lot of Black comedians coming out getting their own sitcom. If you were a stand-up comedian and you were Black, like, it was a given you were going to get a sitcom. There was a lot of market for Black laughter, she says, but there wasn't a lot of market for Black drama. And so she felt like, you know, where were all the Black Meryl Streeps, you know? And that was something she wanted to investigate. She says this was a time when all the, you know, big names in Hollywood of the 90s, Halle Berry, Queen Latifah, Monica Calhoun, she names like Regina King, Tamala Jones, you know, all these Black actresses. It was like a sisterhood, she says, and they just had each other's back all the time. She said we all had our superpowers, yet we had a healthy competition. She said that we knew at some point we would each get our due in the way that was meant. There was no beef. It was all love, always. Now, one thing that she had a hard time with was the fact that her mom came to visit her and her mom wanted to become her manager. Her mom had seen a lot of other mothers who managed their daughters and felt like it would be a really good thing for Jada to have a manager. And she was like, hey, I'll do it. You know, other moms are doing it. I get tips, you know, for how to do it. And Jada was like, no, because her mom was still an addict. She said, Adrian was still struggling with addiction. With much love and gratitude, I told her that all the belief she invested in me would serve me well, but you got to really know this game to do that, Ma. I don't think that's a good idea. So it was like a back and forth and back and forth. She finally got her mom off her back, but can you imagine? She said, I felt welcomed into this bustling, energized, extended family right out of the gate, but in short, I wasn't looking for things to not work out, and bringing Mama on was not going to help things work out. Now, how is she going to pay the bills in Hollywood? She wasn't a working actress yet. She says, for the first 3 months in LA, I juggled 3 jobs. My main gig at Music Plus, which was a record store, and she cheerfully answered some telephones at a temp agency. And then she said that she had a night job in a personal injury doctor's office where she filled out insurance claim forms that weren't completely above board. But, you know, she's making ends meet. She talks about, you know, some of her favorite haunts. She liked this spiritual new age bookshop that she went to a lot. She said that in LA, there was just so many worlds that I could touch, so many different types of communities and subcultures. All I had to do was find my tribe. She says Pac was still around. He was in the Bay Area, and he'd check up on her frequently. Every few weekends or so, I'd drive up to see him, or he'd come to see me. At this point, he was becoming known with Digital Underground and had started to be featured on records like Same Song. Things were about to really get rolling for him, and he predicted they would for me too. Then she says that she had become friends with Keenen Wayans. And she said that Keenen it's all due to him that she was ever able to get up in the world. Now, he had that sketch comedy show In Living Color, and it had debuted the month before she got to Los Angeles. She said that his show not only became a hit, but was an audacious representation of diverse talent and creativity in Hollywood. He was so ahead of the curve, launching careers for everyone from Rosie Perez to Jim Carrey to his brother Damon Wayans. Now, she says that, she'd met him at a party. They became friends, and she kept pushing him to let her be on as one of the fly girls on Living Color. And, he's like, oh, really? Is that what you want to do? Well, why don't you keep doing what you're doing? She's like, I danced for years. Why can't I do that? And he's like, you didn't come to Hollywood to be a dancer. So why don't you just push on with your acting career? It's going to happen for you. He seems like he kind of like, in all of her descriptions of him, like she acts like they're real tight. And I'm not saying that they weren't, but he kind of looks at her like a little sister who he's sort of bemused by, and she keeps trying to horn in on her big brother's good times. And he's like, why don't you go back and play with your toys, okay? That kind of attitude, like, kind of like not mean, but just not letting her in and kind of like giving her ideas of other things she could do instead. But she definitely does owe him for the fact that she has any career in Hollywood for a couple of reasons. But the first reason is that he steered her out of some super dicey waters that and she says that her ignorance was about to lead her into. In order to understand that, we got to have some backstory. Okay, it goes all the way back to the Be More Street days. When she was, running rampant on the Be More streets, she says that she met this guy who she calls JB. JB was a Philly-based heavy hitter in the drug game and part of a clique known as the Junior Black Mafia. Well, he was running the circuit from New York to Philadelphia to Baltimore. And she says that at one point he had invited she and her friend Fawn to Philly. She says, we met him at a stash house. That sticks out in my memory because when he asked, you two want to go shopping? We said yes. And he directed me to the laundry room and said to grab whatever cash we needed from the dryer. She said they opened the dryer. There's a big garbage bag in there full of cash. So she also checked the washing machine. It was full of cash too. So she and Fawn decided to help themselves. They both helped themselves to 15 grand a piece. And they went shopping. She says JB was real fond of Fawn, her friend. And Fawn, she played the game. She wasn't going to give him any mind. But she'd come around and, she'd flirt. But she was never giving too much of herself. That was Fawn's way. Fawn was smart about that. She kept things simple without hurting feelings. Dudes liked the challenge of her aloofness. She was not interested. And conquerors always love the chase of the unconquerable. Anyway, she's mixing it up with JB from time to time. And she says that when I got home in the summer after college, she paged JB to find out what was going on with him. And who should answer but the feds? They caught JB. They want to know, how do you know JB? And she says that she was quick on the spot. She says, he didn't tell me what his name was. Well, I know him as Harold Jackson. She said she just made that up, but she explained that she'd been away at college and she met this guy once at a party. Whether or not they believe me, I don't know. But as I hung up the phone, I felt my heart racing. It was so sad. Damn, they got JB too. And see, this is where I have no pity. This is where I get real frustrated with Jada. JB is a thug, right? So what are you like, damn, the feds got JB. Yeah, they did get JB because he's selling drugs on the streets and killing people, right? So this is why I get real annoyed, because it's like, all right, she wants to have this anger and this angst towards the judicial system. But it's like, if you're not doing anything wrong, the feds aren't going to come after you. I feel like Jada wants to play both sides of the fence. She wants to run the streets and be crazy and all her friends and everything in that lifestyle and be really indignant when they get caught, like, oh, they lost the game, But it's like, it's not a game. People, this is a life and death situation. Oh, they got JB, the feds got JB. JB is a criminal. It's almost like she wants the criminals to win, And so I'm just like, okay, but you want to be part of polite society and you want to go to Hollywood and you want to live the dream and you want to become an actress and all of this. But in order to do that, that requires you to sort of not be a criminal, right? You can't be part of like regular society and also part of the underbelly. And it's going to work out. Now, it could work out for a while. But it bothers me that she is so protective of this lifestyle that's hurting other people. And even in her recollection of it, she's like, oh, the good days on the Be More streets, just romanticizing it. That's a criminal enterprise. It's hurting people. And you can't be mad when the police want to take down the criminals. Not long after I arrived in LA, I received a call from JB, who had gotten my number from Fawn. He asked me for a favor. This is quite a favor. She says that he was going to send me some photos. He wanted me to change the dates on them and be willing to testify in court that he was in LA visiting me at the time of those dates. He obviously needed an alibi. JB was someone who'd always had my back, and I'd learned a lot from him. For everything he'd done for me, my reaction was easy, no problem. What? What? This criminal just calls you and says, hey, could you perjure yourself on the stand for me? And you're like, sure, boo, you gave me that 1,500 grand. Come on, Jada. Like, come on. What are you thinking? How could you possibly think that was a good idea? And how could you possibly think this person's on your side that would ask you to do that for him? And what actually has he done for you, by the way? See, that's what's not made clear. He'd done so much for me. He'd done everything for me. He was, she acts, the retelling of this story is very like, I knew him. He was on the periphery of my Be More Street experience. He was after my girl Fawn and all this. But it's like, but then when, she's like, and it was just, why would she come back from college and call JB? If he's just sort of like on the periphery, like when you get back from college, you're going to connect with your close people. You're not going to call somebody who's on the periphery of your lifestyle. And then to be like, for him to feel comfortable enough with her that he could be like, hey, could you change the dates on these pictures? Like, that's a huge ask, So I'm not getting the full story here. What exactly was going on with you and JB? How exactly were you involved with him that you would be willing to set your future career on fire so that you could help this joker? Anyway, she said a few days later, while I was kicking it with Daphne at Keenen's, he overheard me explaining to Daphne what I needed to do for JB. Keenen immediately piped in. Good for Keenen. He goes, you cannot do that. Keenen usually had the most cool, laid back, you can't ruffle my feathers demeanor, but in this instance, he was adamant and wanted to make it very clear that I was about to put myself in a very bad position. Jada, Keenen insisted, you cannot go to court and testify about dates you changed on pictures. That's perjury. You will go to jail. And now Jada says such true words. Well done, Jada. She says, now my 18-year-old naive ass had not thought about that. All I was thinking about was that JB was my homeboy who needed my help. If you ride hard for people when you're flying high, you ride with them harder when they're down and out. Pleading my case, I said, he asked and I don't... Keenen interrupted and spoke to me with full authority. Lying in court is perjury. You will go to jail. His point was, what real friend would ask you to jeopardize yourself that way? I knew he was right, and as terrible as I felt, I had to tell JB that I couldn't do what he asked. Years later, I was able to do him a solid and help his family. She's always, helping the... I helped Chet. I helped JB, years later. Okay, hey, Chet, JB, could you, let us know? Did she help you? Anyway, she says years later she was able to help the drug fiends. She says, I was so thankful for Keenen. If he hadn't taken the time to talk some sense into my young, arrogant, thick skull, there's no telling where I would have landed. Gold star there, Jada. Yes, gold star on that statement. Although JB understood, I still felt that this was betraying the code I knew. Being a ride or die was central to my worth. Maybe I needed to relearn the code. Here, my friend, here. I think it would be hard to come off of a lifestyle in which, keeping it real meant that you just did whatever needed to be done, legal or otherwise. And I think that it would be very hard to convince yourself that this wasn't betrayal. That the betrayal began when that person asked you to perjure yourself on the stand. That was a betrayal of friendship, and you not acquiescing to that demand is not betrayal, but that would be really hard to unlearn. That would be hard. Anyway, she goes on about what was happening in Hollywood. She tells us about the first time she met Eddie Murphy. She said that one time she brought this dude from Baltimore to a party. He'd just been released from jail. So she brings him to a party at Keenen's house. And she was introduced to Eddie Murphy by Keenen. She said, when we asked Eddie if we could take a picture with him, he obliged. As the night went on, Eddie waved me over to where he was standing. He asked, who's that peanut head that you're with? He uses some other words, but he does call him a peanut head, but then he says other things that I'm not allowed to say. Who's that peanut head blank you're with? I cracked up laughing. He came back fast with words to the effect of, no, really. I responded directly saying, my boyfriend? Him? Yes, him. Eddie smiled. And then he asked what I was drinking, which was an alcoholic beverage of some kind, and he told me alcohol wasn't good for me. drinking? I asked. Water. My body is my temple. As we talked, I saw the truth of this idea in the brightness of his eyes, the vibrancy of his energy, the smoothness and the clarity of his skin. He was just shiny and full of life, and I thought, no toxic substances in the body makes one vibrant. That was dope to me. Most of the time you heard about big stars partying with all kinds of drugs and alcohol. I was surprised by his get down. And you know what else I was surprised by? He was kind. Eddie and I were friends from then on. He gave me a nickname, Jada May. You know, I've heard like fantastic things about Eddie Murphy. You know, he's just a real family man. And, you know, he just keeps his life separate from his career. You know, he's really good at like drawing that line. And, you know, I sometimes wonder, you know, he had such a huge career in the 90s and late 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And I think that, you know, I wonder if there's ever a time when he would come back and do stand-up. You know, his act then, I've heard he kind of looks down on how he used to do. And I don't know if he'd be a different comedian now, but I think it would be really interesting to see him come back and start doing stand-up again. Anyway, she says that I was learning that if you heeded the lessons successful people have to offer and stay on your game, the successful people around you see your effort and they want to give you assists. Nobody can do it for you, and nobody's truly inspired to help you in a real way if you're not willing to help yourself. And nor should they. To be successful takes so much more than who you know. That's such a true point. You know, again, thank you, Jada. This chapter is really meeting a need that I had. I needed something that was more substantial, but that is so true, because it really will only take you so far as to who you know. But eventually people are going to drop you if you're lazy and you can't manage yourself. I mean, most of the time. We are sort of living in a really disappointing environment in which failing up is a trend. But I would say that on the whole, as a universal rule, working hard will eventually get you to all the places where just simply have, like, you might not be the most talented person, but if you're the one that's willing to work the hardest, you can ascend so much quicker than even the person who has talent but is too lazy to expose that talent. Okay, so we're gonna skip ahead a little bit, not a lot, but she keeps nagging Keenen to give her a spot on his show as a fly girl, and he keeps being like, no, you didn't come here to be a dancer, so I'm not gonna employ you as a dancer, but what you do need is an agent. She said that she didn't see how she was ever gonna get an agent because nobody wants to work with little no-name Jada Pinkett, you know. And so, you know, she says, at this early stage of the game, when I was working my 3 jobs, I didn't even have an agent. Getting an agent was very difficult and very necessary. But again, convincing an agent to take on a newcomer was no easy task. It just seems like such a nightmare. You know, it's like you got to have tape in order to get on a show, but no one's going to give you any tape if you've never been on a show. It's like, yeah, it's so hard and complicated. And, you know, so she's just trying to figure out how she's going to get an agent. And Keenen said, look, you don't need to get a big name agent. In fact, you need to get somebody who has time to be passionate about you. Even if you could get on with one of these big agencies, they're not going to have time to dedicate towards you, and everything's going to be about the bigger names in the agency. So you'll get whatever bonus thrown your way. You find an agent who's passionate about you, and then you'll manage to make it ahead in this world, because they can really champion you in a way that a big agency couldn't. So don't look down on having to have a smaller agent. So she says, well, could I use your name? And he doesn't ask any questions by what she means by that, but he's like, yeah, sure, whatever you need, little sis. So she opens up the yellow pages. She finds a couple of names of talent agents, and she made the first of what I expected would be many phone calls to Nancy Rainford. Much to my shock, she answered the phone. I vivaciously introduced myself and, without taking a breath, added, and Keenen Ivory Wayans told me that you're a great agent and he suggested I call you. Oh, really? How does he know me? Nancy responded, apparently flattered. Nothing like a little line to get you in the door. Well, I didn't ask. He just said that you were a great agent and that I should call you. Nancy was in. I could tell from her tone. She asked me a few questions and I told her a little bit about myself, and then she said, could you meet me today? When I picked Nancy Rainford's name out of the phone book, I had no idea she was Black, but that was a plus for me. She owned her talent agency, and she had another client who was on the rise, Michael Rappaport, who made a dope friend at the time and who gave me rides to a slew of auditions. She said watching Nancy work was really inspirational for her. She said Nancy was fierce, smart, and fearless. I loved that about her. I would often hang out in her very small office and watch how she conducted business over the phone. She carried the same kind of confidence that I had. We knew what we were made of, and we knew we had something special to offer. And you were lucky one if you jumped on it now. She said she really enjoyed watching Nancy in The Art of the Deal, because Nancy would say no, basically, and then hang up the phone confidently and look at me predicting, don't worry, they'll call back in about 20 minutes. She understood early that although lots of work was available for Black talent, the deal makers loved to lowball us. I'm going to pause there because I circled the word they like to lowball us. Does she mean they like to lowball Black people, which is the inference? But I think that that's a little bit, perhaps that's true. But I would say the deal makers lowball everybody. That's what's called bargaining. You know, they're not going to give anybody the highest price. And I don't think that it's specific to your Blackness. I think it's just that why would they give you everything you're asking for? That's not how a deal is made. Anyway, Nancy taught her how to walk away from deals that didn't respect her worth. She said, it's a lesson that I've held on to throughout my career. More than that, she showed me how the game was played behind the curtain. Now, she said that it really started happening for her when she got a TV pilot for an ABC series called Mo's World. She had to go to 13 callbacks because they didn't really like her. She wasn't quite what they were looking for the part. Apparently, they said she was rough around the edges and that she wasn't the look they wanted. But she eventually got the part of the teenage sister who narrates the show. And it was great for her because it finally gave her some tape that she could show. And also she ended up becoming friends with Dwayne Martin, who had just come. He was a prominent role in the pilot. And he just arrived from New York. He was playing for the Knicks. And then he came to start acting in Hollywood, and they became good friends and have been good friends ever since. Now she sort of veers over to talking about how there were things about her that, and she's alluded to this so much, but there were things about her that just kept kind of being a problem for her. The way she carried herself, her East Coast accent, it kept becoming an issue. And it was something that she kind of refused to shed for a while because she just kept thinking, y'all are trying to change me. I don't need to change. You know, this is who I am. Take me. I'm the whole package. Take me as a whole package. Don't peel off parts of me and then say I'm okay. I mean, it was a point of contention for her that they were asking her to be different than the person she was when she arrived. So she gives us an example. She says that her agent, Nancy, called to say that she had a meeting with a young writer-director named John Singleton for a feature film being produced by Columbia, Boys in the Hood. And it was going to be a really big movie, and she was really excited to have a chance to read for him. She said she took a chair across from him and the casting director, who began to read the scene with me. As we read, I couldn't gauge what John was thinking. When I lifted my eyes to his after the reading was done, however, there was clearly a problem. Looking me dead in my eyes, John told me, that East Coast accent, you need to lose it, because if you don't, you'll never make it in this business. Looking dead in his eyes, I told him quietly, we'll see. After that, we talked a little more. I thanked him for the opportunity, and I bounced. When I left the audition, I felt instinctively that he was wrong. Yet I also understood where he was coming from. Deep down, I believed that what I had to offer would overpower an accent, because the one thing you can't buy or teach is energy. So she had that in spades. What's this? This accent's not going to hold her back. Please. You know, but the truth is, it was holding her back. She says the postscript to this story is that John and I became fans of each other. Whenever I saw him, I teased him about his prediction, and he'd say, well, you got rid of that accent, though. And we'd both laugh, and I'd say, you got me there. So what she's learning is that she can stand her ground and put her hands on her hips and say, no, I'm not changing. No one's going to make me. But if she wants to keep being rough around the edges, East Coast, tough girl, then she's just limiting what she can do. And that it isn't a revoking of her. It's just, if you want to do this job, it's going to require these things of you. That's not making you less you. You can be you any way you want to be out in the world. But when you come to this job, you have to do these things. And every job is like that. It's just, you know, when I go and teach, I have to do and be and say certain things in that environment. It doesn't mean I can't go and be and do, you know, outside of the classroom, but in the classroom, I can't do those things. That's not a revoking of who I am as a person. It's this job requires certain things from me, and so I bring those certain things to the table. Acting is hard to, it would be very hard as an actor to realize that nobody is trying to push you away from who you are, because you show up on the screen, you're drawing from who you are in order to act. So it would be very hard to feel that people weren't rejecting who you are in order for you to play a certain part, you know? Well, she's waiting for her big role. She's taking a lot of guest star roles. And she was on a lot of shows, True Colors, Doogie Howser, MD, 21 Jump Street, and she even auditioned for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know, one of the things that people really didn't like about her was that she was so short. Her height, people felt like, was a real issue. Why? She could wear heels, you know. So I don't really see why that kept coming up for her. But, you know, as always, we love her. But how tall is she? And that was one of the reasons why she didn't get on the Fresh Prince. But she said that when she was coming out of the casting office, who should she run into? Guess who, she says. We'd never met before. Our exchange was hardly memorable. What's up? He asked with a cheerful grin. What's up? I asked in response, not giving him the time of day, and I kept moving. That's crazy. I could not have walked past Will Smith and just been like, what's up? And just kept walking. The star of the show just walked past, you know? Like, I'd be like, yes, sir. I don't think I could have walked past. Anyway, she wants us to feel that he didn't do anything for her. And even the second time she sees him, she wants us to know he didn't do anything for her. She says the next time I saw him sometime later was in Bullock's department store, where I'd go shopping with my mom, who had come for a visit. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tall, lanky, nice-looking guy trekking past me. He was wearing a backpack. Mom asked under her breath, isn't that Will Smith? Oh, yeah, I said with a nod. Again, he had that cheerful bounce and that vibe. He didn't have a care in the world. Did you take that out of him? She says, I mean, he had a television show on the air. Life was good for him. My mom said, no, why can't you be with somebody nice like him? The Fresh Prince? I exclaimed. He would teach me not to judge a book by its cover. Okay, how bland. How bland. You know, and I'm not saying she has to be like, I was slayed by him, and make up a big story that isn't true. I think she's telling the truth. I think she didn't care about him. I think that she was underwhelmed by him, and, you know, maybe thought he was kind of corny or something. I don't know. It's not surprising that she would want us to be impressed by how little she cared about him. It's interesting that she would almost demean him. You know, he's tall, lanky, kind of a goofball, bouncing on his feet as he walks by with his little backpack. I mean, she's already making it seem like he wasn't worth the notice. All right, now we get on to the last story, and that's how did she get on A Different World. Now, she was almost on Blossom. Now, this is crazy. Because of her height and because she was so short, she had auditioned for the role of a 12-year-old in this show. It was a reoccurring role, and she'd gone to the audition in a green onesie and her hair in this sort of childish little curly top bun, and she looked like a straight-up 12-year-old, and so they wanted her. They called her agent. Her agent was thrilled. And, you know, Nancy made it clear that the show was going to be huge and it was going to be a big break, and this didn't happen often, so you better snag this while you can. And Jada was like, yeah, but I don't really know if I want to play a preteen for years. I mean, that's kind of weird. And good call. That is creepy as hell. And so, you know, out of pure instinct and intuition, she said, I feel like the rooms and the casting calls and everything, I feel like there's this energy and people do want me, and I just don't know if I need to settle for this particular role. And her agent was really annoyed with it, because it's like, look, do you not understand? I worked hard to get you this spot. How can you possibly turn your nose up at it? You know, for the hopes and the dreams that perhaps one day you won't have to play a preteen for years. Maybe you should just take what you can get while the getting's good. But Jada believed that there was something better out there, and you know, it's very good that she did let that one go. I have to say, with good reason. I just wouldn't, I mean, she's like 20 years old. Can you imagine paying somebody who's 8 years younger than you? I wouldn't want to do it. True to my instincts, only 2 weeks later, a new opportunity came along. It was an audition for the guest star role of a student who had contracted HIV on A Different World. The show had been on for 3.5 seasons, and thanks to the stewardship of Debbie Allen, was unlike anything on television at the time. Originally, the show about student life at Hillman, a historically black college, had been conceived as a Cosby spinoff. It was a sitcom, but a bold departure from the standard fare, with Debbie overseeing the development of multifaceted characters, relationships, and storylines that reflected the concerns, social issues, and culture of black college students and faculty. And Debbie was one of Jada's like personal idols. Like, she had looked at Debbie Allen as this like somebody who could really show her the way to have a multifaceted career in Hollywood as a black female. She's mentioned it in previous chapters how much she really respected Debbie. And so she pours out all of this to her. You know, I'm so excited to be sitting in front of you. You're my biggest inspiration. Debbie wants to know all about her life. You know, so she starts asking her all these questions. And, you know, what's your family life like? What was your life like in Baltimore? Tell me about where you went to school and all of this. She pours out all of this. And Debbie's so, like, genuinely interested in hearing her story. And then Debbie says, well, we're going to give this role to somebody else. So Jada's like, okay, I get it. And she says, because I want you on the show as a series regular. And then she tells Jada that she's been so inspired by hearing Jada's story that she's planning on writing a role specifically for Jada. And that previous to Jada walking into that room, there hadn't been a role for Jada on that show, but now she's going to make one. And it's going to be all based on the things that had happened to Jada in Baltimore. Well, as you can imagine, this is balm to Jada's soul, because she feels like this is the first person who's ever seeing her, who values her background. And she says, I thought I would cry. Not because I had just been told I was going to be on one of the hottest shows on television, starring next to the one and only Jasmine Guy, but because my idol, the woman I had admired all my childhood, saw me. Debbie Allen felt my presence. She saw my promise, and she believed in me. What could feel more rewarding or make me feel more worthy than that? I felt seen by this incredible woman in a way I had never felt before. And that would be huge. Like, no one could ever take that away from her. That would be an amazing experience if your career idol sees you, and like not only sees you and talks to you and like has a conversation with you about who you are, but then says, in my hit show, I'm now going to write a character based on you. Like, whoa, that would rock anybody's world in the most positive way. She says, needless to say, I could barely speak. This was a career-making moment like no other. The role of Lena James didn't exist before I walked into that room, and Lena James would catapult my career to the stratosphere. The kicker was, my painful past was the very thing that allowed me and my character to be relatable, emotionally meaningful to audiences, and to many, lovable, for the next 2.5 seasons. So that's where that chapter ends. I thought that was an interesting chapter. You know, I think too that, isn't that kind of like the beautiful part of life, is how many times you find out that the really difficult things that happen in your life can sometimes come around and actually bear really beautiful fruit in your life. And, you know, it's really sad that Jada had such a difficult life, but had she not, you know, she may not have made any mark on that, in that audition. She may have gotten the guest star of the person with the HIV situation, but she wouldn't have had a recurring role. And it's because, you know, her life was interesting enough that they thought there was material there to write a very interesting character that fit with the point of the show. So, I mean, life has a way of really beautifully working out in a lot of respects. All right, my hour is up. I will see you guys later, and I'll see you this Sunday for Trader King. Bye.